peace in my life and in the world. Light in the dark, light is a spark, igniting the flames of love. Sing of the love, sing from the heart. Open your heart to embrace beauty. Open your eyes, illumine your mind. Let light be your guide today. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Light the path of all who seek the truth. May light always guide my steps to you. Sing of the love, sing from the heart. Open your heart to embrace beauty. Open your eyes, illumine your mind. Shine fill your heart and your
من لاله آزادم، خود رویم و خود بویم. در دشت مکان دارم، هم فطرت هایم. من لاله آزادم، خود رویم و خود بویم. در دشت مکان دارم، هم فطرت هایم. خوابم نم باران است، فارغ ز لب جویم. تنگ است محیط آنجا، در باغ نمی رویم. من لاله آزادم، خود رویم و خود بویم. در دشت مکان دارم، هم فطرت هایم. از خون رگ خویش است، گر رنگ بر رخ دارم، مشاطه نمیخواهم. زیبایی رخسارم، بر ساقه خود ثابت، فارغ ز مددگارم. نی در طلب یارم، نی در غم اغیارم. من لاله آزادم، خود رویم و خود بویم. در در دشت مکان دارم، هم فطرت هایم. جوش می و مستی بین در چهره گلگونم، داغ است نشانش در سینه پرخونم. آزاده و سرمستم، خو کرده بهامونم. رانده است جنون عشق از شر به افسونم. من لاله آزادم، خود رویم و خود بایم. در دشت مکان دارم، هم فطرت هایم. خوابم نم باران است، فارغ ز لب جویم. تنگ است محیط آنجا، در باغ نمی
خدا President, I would like to take this occasion to express my deep gratitude to all those who have supported this institution and who are continuing to support it today. When I decided to launch a university in Pakistan, I had done some homework to try to understand what profile of institution would best fit the needs of higher education in Pakistan. And what was clear was that civil society was underserved in education in Pakistan. And civil society meant all the pillars upon which men and women function in a civil way, how they support each other, how they develop their future, how they create pillars of strength so that institutions can move forwards. And I have to say today that it is a source of immense joy that I have in front of me men and women who are so generous, so thoughtful, and who are so encouraging for what we're all trying to do. To provide high-quality medicine in Pakistan was always going to be a challenge by the nature of the country, by the size of the population, by the different areas where people were living, from the very hot to the very cold. So it was always going to be a challenge to build an institution that could meet the requirements of the country. I feel sustained and helped and encouraged by your generosity of time and of thought. And I would say to all those who have been so generous in sustaining this institution, please share with us all your thoughts about what we can do, what we might be able to do better, what we should try and correct, and that we should continue to position this institution in its correct place in service to Pakistan. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome, bienvenue, khosh amaded, ya Ali Madad. C'est un vrai plaisir de vous accueillir ce soir. It is an honor to be able to host this evening's segment of Friday Night Reflections. My name is Sahar, and this evening I'm coming to you from the beautiful town of Kharagh in Vilayat-e Mukhtari Koistani Badakhshan in eastern Tajikistan, where I have had the pleasure of living for the last 2 years. And in the same way that I'm coming to you this evening from another part of the world, the stories and reflections and conversations that we will share in this evening also broaden us to think about what's happening in other parts of the world. For those of you who don't know, Kharagh is a town of just over 30,000 people, almost all of whom are from our Jamaat. It is located about a 12-hour drive along a long, winding, bumpy road from the capital city of Dushanbe. I first arrived here in 2018 as a fellow through the Aga Khan Foundation Canada's International Youth Fellowship Program, and have been here ever since. Today, I work for the Aga Khan Fund for Economic Development's regional energy portfolio, which includes Tajikistan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. It is an incredible moment to be a part of, to be able to witness the laying of the foundation for what promises to be an incredibly transformative next few years and decades. In fact, the Aga Khan Fund for Economic Development started its energy activities in the region in 2002 through its project company Pamir Energy, which operates here in Tajikistan. And what is absolutely incredible about what Pamir Energy has managed to achieve is that it has created a model for rural electrification that is now being scaled up and replicated in other parts of this world, particularly in northern Afghanistan and soon in northern Pakistan. Actually, just this last March, on Nowruz, on March 21st, 2020, the company Badakhshan Energy, also a subsidiary of ACFED, took over the energy operations in the province of Badakhshan in northern Afghanistan. And over the next 30 years, we'll endeavor to do a similar work as Pamir Energy to provide accessible, reliable, affordable, clean energy to the entire population of the province. It has also been an incredible learning opportunity, both professionally and personally, to be here. I didn't really know that much about Tajikistan or the Badakhshan region before I arrived here, and it has pushed me out of my comfort zone in so many ways. Just an hour after I first arrived in Kharagh, a co-worker of mine came and swept me away to a Pamiri wedding. Now, you can't just sit and eat and observe at a Pamiri wedding. You must participate and dance, and I have never had to learn a new dance style so quickly with so many eyes watching me. I've also learned a lot about Tajik and Pamiri cuisine as well. My first morning in Kharagh, I was handed a bowl of sheer choy, which had a very generous spoonful of butter melting in it and some fresh bread. Sheer choy, sheer means milk and choy is chai, is milk tea. But here's the catch. It's not like our masala chai for those of you who are from South Asian background or East African background, where we put sugar in our chai with other spices. In this chai, you put salt, and at first I thought I was being pranked, but over the last 2 years have come to get used to salt in my chai. I've also gotten used to carrots in my pilau, which I never had before. So it has been an incredible opportunity to learn about different cultures, different ways of being, and the ways in which our Jamaat exist in other parts of the world. But nothing, in terms of cuisine, nothing beats my Nanima's cooking. It has been over a year now since I last visited Canada, particularly Treaty 7 territory, Calgary, which is where I'm from. It has also been over a year since I last tasted my Nanima's cooking. Nanima, just for you, Ya Ali Madad, I love you. I hope Badotik I hope you're doing well. And though there is so much that is different here from Canada, the contributions made by the Canadian Jamaat in Kharagh, in this region, surround me. For example, this evening I'm coming to you from the Ismaili Jamaat Khana in Khorog, which actually opened just over a year and a half ago on December 12th, 2018. And this, the designer for this Jamaat Khana is our very own Canadian, Farokh Noor Mohammed. But I also remember the day that this Jamaat Khana opened. It's the second Jamaat Khana in the country, the first being in Dushanbe. And on December 12th, so on the eve of Salgira Khoshali, the elders of the Jamaat were invited to attend Jamaat Khana. And it has been incredibly special to witness some people being able to pray in a Jamaat Khana space for the first time in their lives. It's incredibly special, and it's incredibly powerful. And this space is very much cherished in the Kharagh landscape. There's so much in this town that is very special, and so much that the AKDN institutions that exist here have been able to do in order to improve the quality of life of the Jamaat in the region. I also, speaking of Jamaat Khanas, want to wish a huge heartfelt Mubaraki to the members of the Canadian Jamaat. As this week, many of our Jamaat Khanas have reopened, and over the next few days, many more will also do the same. And I can't wait for the day that we can also have the Jamaat Khana in Kharagh reopened for congregational prayer. The impacts of this pandemic have been felt in so many ways, beyond just the disruption of daily life. In Tajikistan, in many ways, the economic downturn hit before the virus itself did, and has already had very real impacts in the lives of community members and Jamaati members here, in terms of food security, in terms of access to capital, to remittances that their family members would normally send back from Russia. Education was obviously disrupted, given that schools had to shut down, and this opportunity for online learning is not as accessible as it is in other parts of the world. The way that this global health crisis has impacted parts of the world like Tajikistan have been incredibly different from how it's been experienced in Canada, and tonight we will be exploring just that. We're going to start our program today with a brief address by Council for Canada President Amir Ali Qasim Laka. We will then be joined by a very special guest, President Firoz Rasool of the Aga Khan University. We have this incredible set of conversations that will hopefully force us or encourage us to think about how our experiences in terms of this pandemic are very diverse, but also what opportunities are there. As a Canadian Jamaat, what can we do for other Jamaati members in other parts of the world? How can we support AKDN institutions in other parts of the world to be as responsive as possible in the face of this crisis? And of course, we will conclude this evening with our musical expressions. So grab your masala chai or your sheer choy or your bone broth and let's get started. Please welcome President Amir Ali Qasim Laka.
My dear brothers and sisters, Yali Madad. Over the last 2 weeks, we have gradually opened many Jamaat Khanas across Canada. This has been a blessing and a tremendous source of happiness. We would like to offer our gratitude to all our volunteers, our implementation teams and Mukhi Kamriyas across the country who have worked so hard to make this possible. Thank you for your exceptional work over the past few months. We would also like to express our gratitude to the Jamaat for your patience, cooperation and understanding. We realize this has not been an easy process. There have been changes, many changes and adjustments to what we are normally accustomed to experiencing. But you have shown a lot of understanding and compassion. This has been vital in the success of our reopening and ensuring the safety of our Jamaat. By working together and looking out for one another, we will inshallah be able to continue our reopenings in the days and weeks to come. By next weekend, with some exceptions, we will inshallah have opened up most of our Jamaat Khanas in Canada. I would like to make a request to the Jamaat. As you know, we are working within the constraints of limited capacity in each Jamaat Khana, meaning that every day there are members of the Jamaat who are unable to attend. In a number of instances, members of the Jamaat have registered for a given day, but then not attended as expected. I would request that if you have registered but are unable to attend, that you please cancel your registration as far in advance as possible. Our Jamaat has waited many months for Jamaat Khanas to reopen, so this will ensure that those wishing to attend are able to do so. Members of the Jamaat, throughout Friday night reflections, we have openly discussed matters of priority for the Jamaat and the Jamaat institutions with you. In many instances where guidance from Maulana Hazir Imam has been available, we have shared this guidance with the Jamaat. Of our discussion on many subjects, there were 5 subjects that we have spoken about that are very important: early childhood development, mental health, care for the elderly, knowledge bridges, and the future of work. I want to emphasize that future of work will be a continuing conversation, and to make clear that it is a subject relevant for everyone in our Jamaat. It is not meant for a select few and is applicable irrespective of our current educational or professional or business background. Any member of the Jamaat who has lost or is at risk of losing their job or business due to COVID must start thinking about future growth opportunities to pivot into. We will work with you hand in hand to assist every step of the way. As soon as programs are ready, we will inform the Jamaat, and our supports will be there for everyone, not just a select few. But in the meantime, there is an opportunity for each of us to do our own homework and perhaps get a bit of a head start. Let me now turn to the theme of tonight's program. The current pandemic has had a deep and lasting impact on communities around the world. In many cases, the Aga Khan Development Network and the Aga Khan University have played critical roles as first responders on the front lines. Tonight we are fortunate to have the Aga Khan University President Firoz Rasool join our Friday Night Reflections program. President Rasool will provide a perspective on the impact of the pandemic across our borders and beyond our borders, and describe how our institutions have supported some of the most vulnerable populations worldwide. Inshallah, this will inform our worldview and help us understand the areas of endeavor that our global institutions are involved with, so that we too can find ways to offer our support to those most in need. Thank you and Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you, President Qasim Laka, for those thoughtful reflections. We now move to our conversation with President Firoz Rasool of the Aga Khan University to discuss the Aga Khan University's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and some of the challenges that it's been facing in this time. President Saib Ya Ali Madad, thank you very much for sharing your time with us this evening for our Friday Night Reflection, and for sharing your reflections on how this pandemic is impacting our Jamaat and communities in other parts of the world, and how it's also impacting the work that AKDN is doing in other parts of the world. President Saib, obviously you come to this conversation with an incredible degree of institutional memory, and this is not the first time in AKDN's history that it's being asked to respond in a rapid, in a deep way to a crisis. But perhaps this is a unique crisis. One of the themes that has come up in many of the reflections over the last few weeks is this notion that this particular pandemic, this global health crisis, is highlighting, if not particularly exacerbating, the systemic inequities that surround us. And that is true for Canada. It is also true for other parts of the world. And so when we look at the impacts of this pandemic in other parts of the world, in places of the world where AKU operates, I think it would be useful for us to first understand what the context was pre-pandemic. So if I look, for example, in Tajikistan, where I am sitting today, we were already dealing with a very dynamic and a very complex situation where we have an economy that is almost 50% reliant on remittances that Russian migrant workers are sending back home. We came out of a very mild winter that is now leading to one of the most severe droughts that we've seen in almost a decade. And for a country that relies on hydropower for most of its electricity, the lowest levels of water is quite concerning. We have a huge informal economy where people rely on day-to-day wages. And then all of this was then compounded by the global health pandemic. So in the areas that AKU operates, what was the context pre-pandemic? What were communities already contending with?
So Sahar, the context that we first need to understand is that the Aga Khan Development Network, and within that the Aga Khan University, operates in parts of the world in Africa and Asia, which generally are politically volatile, economically unstable. They suffer from other problems such as the impact of climate change, poverty, food insecurity, and ongoing challenges that day-to-day living brings to them. So the institutions of the Aga Khan Development Network, and as I said within that, the AKU, is accustomed to dealing with crises such as terrorism, natural hazards, be they avalanches or landslides, or rivers that overflow, floods, earthquakes, but also man-made disasters such as civil strife, such as ethnic and other fighting, And so the communities and the people within these countries live with a very, very, the word dynamic is one you could use, but it's extremely volatile, unpredictable. And we have to learn how to help the people who deal with that type of daily living. So, for example, the Aga Khan University in Pakistan has been involved in looking after casualties from terrorism or earthquake or floods or even riots. And this is something we know how to do. But this particular pandemic is something that nobody has ever encountered. The word unprecedented is used often, and it really describes something that is never been seen before, and therefore creates a great deal of uncertainty because you don't know what it is, you don't know how to deal with it, and you don't know many things about it. And every day we are learning, it's not just we as AKU, but the world is learning about the impact, about the effects, about the lack of understanding of its longevity and how you deal with this. And it has not just been devastating from a health point of view, which we could talk about, but even economically, as you described, on top of everything else that you described that the populations have to deal with, what meager earnings they have or opportunities for income have disappeared because people can't go to work, they're locked down, there are curfews, businesses are closed, they're not allowed to leave home. And so how do they earn a living? And so that has also had a massive impact on the livelihoods of the population. So within that context, I would say that the populations and the communities in these countries have actually done remarkably well. And they are resilient, tough people. They've lived through many calamities and catastrophes. And they continue to find ways to survive in this particular situation. And the Aga Khan Development Network is doing a great deal to support them in this area, both the Jamaat, but also communities that live within the areas where the Jamaat lives and outside. We have been involved as AKU in helping the governments in improve their capacity, training their people, improving their systems, so that they can deal with this particular pandemic. The knowledge of what is it, how do you deal with it, how do you treat people, what about vaccines, what about, who does it affect the most? Why is it that it affects some people very severely, but others not so much? What are the impact on pregnant women, on children? I mean, all of these things are not understood. So we have been helping governments who have a national responsibility understand or at least get some knowledge and capacity to deal with this type of situation. So it is in many ways, this pandemic is a disaster on top of others. But as I said, the populations have fared well. We've seen the pandemic in different stages of its growth as we go. Some countries are just beginning to see an increase or a surge. Some countries are beginning to have peaked and are coming down, at least from the first wave. And all in all, it's very difficult for these populations to have to deal with what are the prescribed guidance, if you like. So we hear about social distancing, where you can't have 2 meter social distancing in the middle of a slum, or where people share 10 people to a room or a home. And so these are our challenges. You ask people to wash their hands, but sometimes there is no water available or soap available. So how do they do that? And we ask people to constantly be aware and wear masks. Now, masks have been made available to many people across all of these countries, and people are and they're making their own masks. So people understand that. But I think the fact that the population is much younger, and because of what is called sometimes innate immunity, which comes from the bodies of people who live in these parts of the world being affected by many different pathogens and diseases, they've developed what's called an innate immunity. And maybe, we don't know, but maybe some of that may be at work to make sure that the number of deaths is much, much lower than many people expected, in spite of the fact that the infections may be high. But the people who end up in hospital and then the people who ultimately die is much lower than we see in the West. And that in and of itself is a bit of a conundrum or a question that many researchers are looking at, including the Aga Khan University.
Yeah, I think what you shared is very interesting, and I appreciate how you've referred to this crisis as both unprecedented and leaving us in a state of uncertainty, but also how you have highlighted the resilience of the communities here and how AKDN is working to support that resilience instead of painting a sort of single story of simple vulnerability only and poverty. It's incredibly inspiring and motivating to hear about the work that you guys are doing, President Saib, and the ways in which you're challenging yourselves to look at this situation and to understand it in different ways, in new ways, and in deeper ways. I think if we can expand for a moment to the larger network, to AKDN in general, we're also not immune to the challenges that are at hand, and there's still a lot for us to figure out as a network. So from your perspective, what are some of those challenges that we're still dealing with, we're still trying to figure out, we're still trying to untie, and how can members of the Jamaat that are sitting in Canada tonight reflect a little bit more on how they can perhaps contribute knowledge, tools, and resources to the way that our network becomes more and more responsive to these types of situations?
It's a great question and a difficult question because it covers a broad range of areas. I think first I would say that the Jamaat should be comforted that under Hazir Imam's guidance, that the Aga Khan Development Network and its institutions are focused on addressing the needs of the Jamaat and the people who live among the Jamaat and the countries where the Jamaat lives, because a lot of national governments also rely on the AKDN and its institutions for help and support, knowledge, and so on. And so the biggest area that the AKDN is involved in a big way right now are the areas that I've already mentioned. Food security, where people have lost their ability to access food because they can't grow crops or they can't make a living. So food security obviously is an area that where there is need, that has been an area. The other area also has obviously been health, because this is the health crisis. People's healths are being affected and people are getting infected and losing family members. So how do you make sure that the population stays healthy enough to be able to then earn a living, to be able to then feed their families? So there is a cycle here that the AKDN is involved in. The AKDN is also involved in making sure that the institutions continue to do the work that they're doing. The schools, although some of them are closed, but online classes have started for many of the schools and for the universities. That so learning is taking place, and that life is acquiring a new rhythm. It may not be the same one as pre-COVID, but it's a new rhythm of how people conduct their lives now, and how do they continue to feed their families, how do they continue to earn a living, how do they continue to operate within the environment that we're talking about. So obviously, the AKDN is leading the effort with the national councils in all of these countries to work through, because the national councils on the ground have the best understanding of what the needs are and how best to respond. And we have an unbelievable group of Jamaati volunteers who have all activated or have been mobilized and activated all of the networks and all of the capacities to be able to help in this particular area. So how can the Jamaat in Canada help? I think one is to take an interest and learn about what the work of the AKDN is achieving, how it's helping, the impact that it's making a great deal of impact. And I think another area that they can support this is financially. I think the COVID fund that has been set up by the AKDN, I think is a way or a channel through which support can be provided for these elements that I talked about, and we don't know how long this is going to continue. So it's not like a one-time thing that people should think about an ongoing involvement, engagement, and an ongoing support that would help very much the work of the AKDN for the Jamaat and for other people who live in the same areas.
President Saib, thank you very much for sharing your reflections with us. I think to sum up everything that we've not only discussed, but things that you've been witnessing over the last number of months, to conclude, how would you say this has shifted your understanding of your role as well as the president of such an internationally renowned institution?
I think this past 6 months have really challenged us as leaders of institutions, but in my case, as the president of the university, to make sure that we are not thinking just about the way we used to do things and how do we get back to the way we used to do it. Because the way we used to do it is not going to come back again. We've often heard the words new normal. So for us as the leadership, not just me as the president, but the leadership in the university, which goes through all the academic centers we have, all the academic entities, the hospitals and so on, the research facilities. For us, it's been, how do we now step back, try and understand what it is we're dealing with, understand the needs that this new pandemic has created, and then respond with the appropriate actions, with the appropriate changes. I've given examples of things that we've learned that have caused us to question the way we were doing things before, and now are forcing us to look at the problem differently, or a new problem that we didn't have to deal with before. So it has really stretched us in many different directions and dimensions to cause us to imagine or reimagine, if you like, a new future for the institution in the new context. Because remember, there is a new context now that we have to deal with, and that context is one where we need to make sure that we are able to address the needs of the constituencies that we are supposed to be serving. So if our constituencies' needs have changed, then our responses also have to change. What we do, how we do it, how we help them, and it's all about, a university is about not just education, but it's about knowledge creation. And there's a lot of new questions that have arisen. And there is a set of words or a description that's a democratization of knowledge. That means knowledge now on this new crisis, the coronavirus, can come from anywhere. It's not just a, if you like, the privilege of the West and Western institutions. It could come from Africa, it could come from Asia. China is doing a lot of work, Korea is doing a lot of research, Singapore is doing it, Japan is doing it, South Africa, Kenya, we at AKU, at Pakistan, in Afghanistan we are doing it. So it's not, so the knowledge about this disease and how to deal with it and how to deal with pandemics, maybe countries of the East where we are probably better placed to deal with this, because we deal with all sorts of diseases all the time. Maybe that's what we can bring to the world, including the West. Because if you look at the death rates out of this virus, it's been much, much lower in the East than it has been in the West. Now, some people might say because it is the demography, the population, the average age of the population in the West is much higher than it is in the East and in the South, if you like, the countries of the South. That is all true. But there are also other reasons that people believe may be at play that nobody still understands. And we have the opportunity to study this question or these questions and come up with a new understanding and hopefully some new knowledge that not only we can use for ourselves, but also share with the world.
Thank you so much, President Saib, for sharing your reflections with us, for taking the time out of your very busy schedule, and for giving us a lot to think about. I think I always appreciate conversations where I leave with more questions than I came in, and hopefully we can all go back and try and learn something new and bring something new to the table in terms of concrete actions to support our Jamaati members in other parts of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There is just so much to reflect on amidst these conversations, and also so much to recognize and acknowledge in terms of how our Jamaat has been able to mobilize and come together in the face of such adversity. There is obviously many more opportunities to do things differently, to do things better, to find unique solutions to unique challenges. Let tonight's conversations serve as that springboard to get you thinking about what you can do in this situation. Please note that extended versions of these interviews will be made available on iicanada.org/videos. And if you are interested in learning more about the work that AKDN is doing and the breadth of its activities during this pandemic, I'd encourage you to view the program entitled COVID-19 AKDN's Global Response, which is also available on iicanada.org/videos. This brings tonight's edition of Friday Night Reflections to a close. We end with, as always, our very much awaited musical expressions. It has been a pleasure to host you from Khorog. And if anyone is coming to this part of the world in the near future, you are more than welcome to pack an entire suitcase of Nankatay, Chevro, and Tepla and to share them with me. On that note, thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Tashakur ziyad. Tamakhab khosh.
to the stars and I see your smile, so full of love, so full of joy. Hazard Imam, Imam is a man. You've helped us become united as one. Let me see you put your hands together in praise and love of our beloved Mawla. Thank him for all that he's given us. Thank him for the love that he's shown us. Thank him for the path that he's paved us. Thank him for always being there for us during the times when things got kind of rough. The light of his nur shined above